Hello again and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Today's engine dates back to 1968 and it is an Enya 45 model 6001. Now Enya engines have long been known for their longevity and power, and this engine is no different. It is quite well used, needs a new set of bearings, and I ran this engine about a year ago and it started up and ran beautifully. So before we go to the table and do this quick bearing removal and installation, I just want to say that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and this is a cause that the Boca bearing family takes very, very seriously, as do I. With that said, let's get to the table and do this bearing removal and installation. Okay, so here on the table you can see very few items. In fact, all you see is the crankcase, or the front end of the crankcase with the crankshaft and bearings still installed. I've got the piston here, and I'll explain why I have the piston here in a moment. But I've also got a piece of wood to help me tap this crankshaft out, my light hammer, a flat nose punch. Off to the side I've got my heat gun to heat this up, and a protective glove. So the reason I have this piston here is this is one of the more unique engines that I've ever disassembled, in that it's pretty unusual, and this is the first time I've ever seen one, a piston that actually has two piston rings. This is just pretty unusual for a small RC glow engine. It's not unusual for larger automotive engines, but on this engine it is rather unusual, and I just thought I wanted to show you this here. Now this is, I've got both piston rings, the gaps, shown here so that you could see them. That's not how they would be oriented, but I just thought that that was interesting and of note. And you can see this has actually been in the ultrasonic cleaner for quite some time, and the carbon residue is still really on there. So this is a really well used engine. So with that, let's go ahead and start heating up this crankcase and get these bearings out. So you can see here, I think you can see, it's not very clean. I have not put this in the ultrasonic at all yet, so I'm hoping that this is going to be pretty easy to replace. Now you'll notice that the drive washer is still on here. This one I didn't take off because it didn't give me a gap or a flange to grab on and pull it off with my gear pullers, but it's also not retained with the conical tapered cone, making that super tight mechanical bond. It's just got two flats in here, so in theory, if once this gets heated up, it should just come right off, or it should just pop right off when I tap the crankshaft out. So let's test that theory anyway. I'm going to heat this up pretty heavily, and I just noticed I don't have my vise opened up enough to facilitate this, so I'll have to open my vise up here. Let's see if that's hot enough. I'm going to just set this here for a minute. Get my vise opened up so that we can pop this bearing out. Okay, that looks like that should be just perfect there. Doesn't look like the bearing is coming out with the crank shaft. Okay, so there's our drive hub that just came right off. Oh, the bearing is coming out. So you can see here the bearing is completely out, but we're still stuck in here. So I'm going to have to really hit this again, get this to drop out, because it's really bound up in there. There we go. There we go. And there you have it. So you can see here, this is one of those engine designs where the bearing really only fits about halfway in there. It doesn't fully recess. And that may be a good or a bad thing, because had that bearing not come off on the crankshaft, it doesn't look like it would have given me any kind of lip there to get on the edge of it. So it would have been considerably more challenging to get that off. So now we've got the challenge here of trying to get this off, because there's no cutout in here either. So now I got to try and see how I'm going to get this off. And what I normally do would be see if I can just kind of coax it down by holding it there, but that's not really working, and I don't know, I might be able to get a little bit of a lip on here. There we go. So there was just enough of a gap that allowed me to get that bearing to come off. So now what I can do is I can go put these parts, or at least this part, in the ultrasonic cleaner and get it cleaned up. I'll put all this in there, but this is the part that's critical for the bearing installation. And well, actually, what I need to do now is let's take this front bearing out. How could I forget that? There we go. Now our front bearing's out. Boy, that thing was just really, I mean, this very well, who knows, this very well could have been the original bearings in this engine by the looks of them, but who knows. So anyway, now we can go clean this part up, clean the crankshaft up, and install a new set of bearings. Okay, so I've got all the items necessary to do the bearing installation portion of this video. I have the same wood block to help me tap in the front bearing. I've got a short beat up socket extension that I use as an awl to drive in the rear bearing when it's on the crankcase or crankshaft. I've got a small glass jar here that I always like to put a little bit of lightning lube road power in, because I use this as my reassembly lubricant. And of course I've got the small hammer and the set of bearings here for this engine, and the bearing kit number for this particular engine is ENK 026ST. Now the stock kit number would be just 026, but I've got the stainless steel ones. So those are the bearings I've selected for this. I still have my vise, glove, and heat gun. So let's just take these bearings out. And I believe I'm going to need to remove a shield on this front bearing. The rear bearing came already with the shields removed. So this thing is ready to go. Oh boy, does that feel, boy, does that feel good compared to the other one that came out of there. And here we go. So, yes. This is interesting. This looks like this has got a different type of retaining mechanism here. This is actually one that has a C-clip. So I'm going to have to see if I can. I use the C-clip when I get C-clip bearings. I use a T-pin, and maybe I can zoom in here just a little bit and remember to zoom out, because this C-clip kind of goes in here and there's a gap you have to find, and I'm looking for the gap and I see the gap here. So this is going to be tough for you to see because it's not that super easy to do, but somehow I need to get in here and get this C-clip. Okay, and about 5 seconds after I turn the video off, I turn this thing upside down and that cover came right off. So there it is, and it does have a little bit of grease in there. So this is one of those C-clip bearings. It is a serviceable bearing where you can just remove that clip, clean the bearing out, and re-grease it if you're in an application where you can reuse bearings. Obviously this is not one of those applications, so we're just going to take that out and leave that out. In fact, I actually, yeah, I'm just going to leave the front seal in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to squirt just a little bit of, one squirt of road power into my jar here and just get these things lubricated. Now on the bearings, I'm just lubricating the outer race, and I would do the inside if I could fit my finger in there, but since the crankshaft will be lubricated, I'm not too concerned about that. So that's the next thing I'm going to lubricate. Is I got my crankshaft all cleaned up here, and now it's lubed. And the same thing here. Even though this bearing just barely fits inside this housing, I'm going to go ahead and lube that up really well. So let's get that out of the way. Now what we're going to do is I always put my bearing on the crankshaft first. And that was about where I had a sticking point there, so I think what I'm going to do here is leave that there because I don't think I want to. Maybe I can pop it off here real quick and see if I turn it around, if it'll come off. It feels rather tight there, catching on the port here. Okay, I got it almost all the way past that rear port there. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to leave it here, and when I tap it in place, I'll get it in the rest of the way. So now all that's left to do is heat this front housing up a bit and install these bearings. Let me get this set better for installation of front bearing. That'll work. So heating up the aluminum just allows it to expand a little bit so that installation of the bearings goes a little bit easier. That should be plenty. So let's get our front bearing here. Wow, that thing just basically just dropped right into place. I didn't even really need to do anything. We'll see how this goes in here now too. So keep in mind that bearing may be seated already, partly, but obviously the crank shaft is not. So and I would take my glove off, but this is rather warm. There you have it. Beautiful installation. This engine is ready to be reassembled, and that's all there is to installing the bearings in this 1968 Enya 45 model 6001 engine.